The old town of Millbridge was the kind of place that looked beautiful by day but breathed a different life after dark. The streets, lined with cracked cobblestones and leaning lamp posts, held secrets only the brave dared to uncover. It was in this town that a chilling legend lived, a story whispered among the locals about a figure known only as the Midnight Caller. Those who answered his call were said to vanish without a trace, their homes left untouched, their lives paused as if they had simply melted into the night. No one dared to speak about it loudly, but everyone knew the rule. When the clock strikes midnight, never pick up the phone. Olivia Simmons had heard the stories since childhood. She thought they were nothing more than ghost tales spun by bored townsfolk desperate for excitement. Now, at 28, with a new job at the local library and her own tiny rented house on Pine Street, she had other things to worry about. Life was predictable, a cycle of quiet days and lonelier nights. Until one rainy evening, when the phone began to ring at exactly midnight. The wind howled against the thin window panes, and the old trees outside groaned as their skeletal branches scraped the roof. Olivia sat curled up on her worn-out sofa, a thick blanket around her shoulders, half watching an old black-and-white horror movie flickering on the television. When the landline rang, it jolted her heart into a frantic rhythm. She stared at the receiver across the room, frozen. Who could be calling at this hour? She almost ignored it. Almost. The ringing persisted, long and shrill, cutting through the silence like a knife. Against her better judgment, Olivia stood up, the floorboards creaking under her weight. She reached for the phone with trembling fingers and pressed it to her ear. First there was nothing. Just static, like the distant roar of an ocean storm. Then a voice, soft, almost a whisper, slithered through the line. "Hello, Olivia," it said. She pulled the phone away, eyes wide. Goosebumps prickled her skin. No one should know her name. No one should be calling. Summoning her courage, she brought the phone back to her ear. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The voice gave a low chuckle, cold and humorless. "You answered," it said. "Now I'm coming." The line went dead. Olivia stood there, heart pounding so hard it hurt. She slammed the receiver down and backed away from the phone. It was just a prank, she told herself. Cruel joke. Someone from town trying to scare her. She turned off the TV, double-checked all the doors and windows, and locked herself in her bedroom, clutching a flashlight and a kitchen knife under her pillow. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house, every whistle of the wind outside kept her on edge. Sometime near dawn, exhaustion finally pulled her into a restless sleep filled with dark, shifting dreams. The next morning, Olivia tried to brush it off. At the library, she distracted herself with shelving books and helping elderly patrons find romance novels. But every time her mind wandered, she could still hear that voice, oily and slick, sliding through her memory. "Now I'm coming." That night, Olivia didn't turn on the TV. She sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sky turn black and the town empty out. Her heart raced as midnight approached. She kept telling herself she wouldn't answer if the phone rang again. She wouldn't. At 11:59 p.m., the phone sat silent and ominous on its stand. Olivia sat frozen in her chair, hands gripping the mug so tightly it hurt. The clock ticked over to midnight, and the phone erupted into a sharp, shrieking ring that echoed through the house like a scream. She squeezed her eyes shut. She wasn't going to answer. She wasn't. The phone rang and rang. After a full minute it stopped. Olivia opened her eyes, her breath shuddering out of her. Relief flooded her body. Maybe that was it. Maybe ignoring it broke the cycle. The silence was thick, heavy. She set the mug down and stood, stretching stiff muscles when the sound came again. Not from the phone, but from somewhere deeper inside the house. 3 slow knocks echoed from her front door. Olivia froze. No one visited her, especially not at this hour. She crept to the peephole, heart hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She pressed her eye to the small glass circle. There was no one there. A cold chill slithered down her spine. She double-checked the locks, every deadbolt and chain secured tight. She stepped back from the door, and just as she did, another knock came, this time from the back door. Fear rooted her to the floor. She tiptoed through the house, each step slow and careful, peeking toward the kitchen where the back door was. Again, no one was there. But as she watched, she saw something, a shadow. A figure moving past the frosted glass window. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The crash seemed deafening in the suffocating silence. She had to do something. She couldn't just stand here. She ran to her bedroom, locked the door and grabbed her phone. No signal. Course. She cursed herself for never bothering to set up proper cell service in this part of town. The landline, should she risk it? Would calling someone somehow invite the caller inside? Another knock came, louder this time, rattling the door on its hinges. Tears filled her eyes. She crouched in the closet, curling herself into as small a shape as possible. She held her breath, listening. Minutes stretched into an unbearable eternity. The knocking stopped. Silence. But it wasn't a comforting silence. It was the kind of silence that screamed. Slowly, Olivia dared to peek out from the closet. She opened the bedroom door an inch, then a little more. The house looked exactly the same. Messy, lived-in, normal. Had she imagined it? She stepped into the hall. Her foot caught something and she stumbled. Looking down, she realized it was an envelope. Old, yellowed paper with her name written in spidery handwriting. She picked it up, hands trembling. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You answered. You belong to me now. The lights flickered and went out. Olivia gasped, dropping the letter. Darkness swallowed the house. In the pitch black, she heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps coming up behind her. Too scared to turn, too terrified to scream, she stood frozen. The footsteps stopped inches away. She could feel something breathing against her neck. A voice, the same one from the call, whispered directly into her ear. See you tomorrow night. And then, nothing. When she finally dared to move, when she flicked on the flashlight she kept in the kitchen drawer, the house was empty. Silent. Normal. Except for the letter on the floor, and the faint scent of something old and rotten lingering in the air. Morning came in a blur of muted sunlight and heavy, aching exhaustion. Olivia hadn't slept. She had sat upright on her couch, clutching the flashlight like a weapon, eyes darting to every creak and whisper of the old house. When dawn finally broke over Millbridge, painting the town in a weak gray light, she felt no comfort. Whatever had visited her last night hadn't been a dream. The letter still lay where she had dropped it. The air still smelled faintly of rot. Olivia knew she couldn't stay here. She needed help. She grabbed the letter and stuffed it into her bag, then practically sprinted out the front door. Every glance over her shoulder made her stomach twist. Was something following her? Watching her? The town felt empty, too quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She didn't stop until she reached the library, her supposed safe place. Inside, everything seemed normal. The clack of keyboards, the soft shuffle of books, the gentle hum of conversation. But Olivia felt like an intruder in her own life. She hurried to the basement archives where old town records were kept, hoping she could find something, anything about the midnight caller. The dusty air was thick down there. Rows of old filing cabinets and crumbling newspapers lined the walls. She spent hours combing through reports, obituaries, and town meeting minutes. First there was nothing. But then she found it. An article dated June 14, 1974. Mysterious disappearances baffle authorities. Residents urged to stay vigilant after midnight calls. The story detailed how, over the course of a summer, 7 people had vanished. All reportedly received a phone call around midnight. None of them were ever found. Authorities had chalked it up to runaways, foul play, even accidents. But the townsfolk whispered something different. That answering the call was an invitation, a contract you couldn't break. Olivia's blood turned cold. There was a photo attached to the article, a grainy black and white image of the victims. Her stomach lurched when she saw it. At the far edge of the group, partially hidden in shadow, stood a man no one else seemed to notice. His face was blurry. his figure tall and impossibly thin. His hand resting on the shoulder of a smiling young woman who would vanish a week later. The caption beneath the photo listed 6 names. The 7th was simply marked as unknown. Olivia shoved the article into her bag. She needed to leave. As she rushed back upstairs, she almost collided with Mrs. Redmond, the elderly head librarian. The woman grabbed Olivia's wrist with surprising strength. "You shouldn't have answered," she hissed, her eyes wild and full of fear. "You invited him." Olivia recoiled, heart hammering. She stumbled outside into the blinding afternoon sun, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The streets of Millbridge suddenly felt unfamiliar, distorted. Everyone she passed seemed to glance at her just a second too long, their eyes empty, their smiles too wide. She drove home, barely paying attention to the road. Her house loomed ahead, looking different somehow, darker, more twisted. The air around it seemed thicker, harder to breathe. Inside, everything was exactly as she had left it. Yet it felt wrong. As if the house itself was holding something in its walls, something alive. The phone rang. Olivia screamed, covering her ears. She wasn't going to answer. She wouldn't. But the ringing didn't stop. It grew louder, more urgent, until it filled every corner of the house. Trembling, she ripped the phone from the wall. Silence. Then from upstairs she heard it, the creak of a floorboard. Someone was in the house. Gripping the flashlight, Olivia crept toward the stairs. Every step felt like walking into her own grave. She reached the top and froze. Her bedroom door was wide open. On her bed, arranged neatly, was another letter. She didn't want to read it. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, to get out, to leave this cursed place behind. But she couldn't. She crossed the room and unfolded the note with shaking hands. "Tonight. Midnight. Answer or I will come inside." Tears welled in her eyes. She crumpled the letter and backed away. She would leave. She would get into her car and drive until Millbridge was nothing but a memory. But when she reached for the front door, it wouldn't budge. The locks turned freely, but the door stayed firm, as if welded shut. She tried the windows, the back door, nothing. It was as if the house had decided she wasn't allowed to leave. Panic clawed at her throat. She pounded on the walls, screamed for help. No one came. No one even looked her way. It was as if she had already been erased. The sun sank low, shadows growing long and hungry. Olivia huddled in the living room, flashlight in hand, knife in the other, watching the clock tick toward midnight. When the first chime sounded, the phone, somehow reattached to the wall, rang once more. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She couldn't answer. She couldn't. The second chime. Third. The ringing grew louder, vibrating the floor, the walls, the very air around her. By the 9th chime, Olivia couldn't think. She was shaking so hard she thought she might shatter. The final chime. Midnight. The phone rang one last time, then fell silent. For a moment Olivia thought maybe it was over. Maybe she had broken the cycle. The house groaned. The lights flickered. A cold, putrid wind blew through the room, though no windows were open. The television turned on by itself, the screen filled with static. And then she saw him. In the reflection of the dark TV screen standing behind her was a figure. Tall, thin, face hidden in shadows, a crooked smile stretching far too wide across his inhuman face. Olivia spun around. Nothing. But the smell of rot grew stronger. The shadows seemed to deepen, shifting along the walls like living things. Then the voice whispered from everywhere at once, low and rasping. "You didn't answer. Now I'm inside." The walls pulsed, breathing. The floor buckled under her feet. Shadows coiled around her ankles, creeping higher, freezing her in place. Olivia screamed, thrashing, but it was useless. The shadows pulled her down into the floor, into darkness so complete it swallowed even her cries. When morning came, the house was quiet. The phone sat on its cradle, silent. The town carried on as if nothing had happened. Weeks later, when a new tenant moved into the little house on Pine Street, they found the place empty but Wrong. Strange whispers would leak from the walls late at night. Sometimes they said the phone would ring at exactly midnight. No one had seen Olivia Simmons again. But sometimes if you passed by the house after dark, you might glimpse a figure standing at the window, staring out, waiting for someone to answer. Waiting for the next midnight caller.